From bustling streets to world-class architecture, New York City's design gives it one of the most recognizable cityscapes in the entire world. Located on the Atlantic coast between Washington, D.C. and Boston, New York City's transportation network ranges from expansive subway and commuter rail systems to stunning bridges and tunnels. Millions rely on these networks to reach jobs, education, healthcare facilities, family, landmarks, and public spaces every single day. However, climate change has brought an increase in storm and weather events to cities across the globe, and the Big Apple is no exception.
The next stop is 34th Street, Herald Square.
The Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or the MTA for short, is the primary transportation agency that operates subway, bus, and rail services in New York City. Their climate resilience roadmap, published in 2024, notes 4 main climate hazards that pose a threat to their service area: coastal surge, torrential rain, sea level rise, and extreme heat. This figure here displays historical extreme rainfall intensity trends. The city sewers were designed to handle 1.75 inches of rainfall per hour. However, we can see here that Hurricane Ida basically doubled this rate at 3.5 inches an hour. The storm created supercell clusters throughout the Northeast. Many subway lines were flooded, causing delays and public outcry. I spoke with Radley Horton, a professor at Columbia University's Climate School, to gain more insight into the atmospheric science behind storms.
Along coastlines. And then furthermore, while we don't necessarily know if the big storms like the hurricanes are going to get a lot stronger, there's still going to be a random element to the path of those individual storms. But what we can say for sure is the higher sea level will mean that when that same storm comes along, the water is going to penetrate further inland. It's going to be deeper. The waves are going to make it in further. So it's going to be more dangerous for people and more damage to our infrastructure as well. Also, as the atmosphere is warming and as the oceans are warming, the same tropical cyclone will actually give us more rainfall than it would have in the past. If we look across the whole northeastern United States, the wettest day per year is producing about 50% more rainfall than it did a couple of generations ago when a lot of New York City's infrastructure, stormwater drains, culverts were designed.
News channels were showcasing footage of flooding left and right.
A flash flooding siege in the Northeast. Deaths reported as the remnants of Ida merged with the front to produce chaos. More than 7 inches of rain in just a few hours. Waterfalls pouring down station stairs, trains pulling in to find platforms, hundreds of flights canceled.
Media of heavy flooding at the Court Square 23rd Street. Rainwater was gushing so hard and so fast it actually knocked over a man who was waiting for the MTA says a nearby construction site did not have a proper pumping system in place.
I spoke to Messaros, a professor at the New York University Tandon School of Engineering, who works as a civil and environmental engineer.
During Ida, we had such intense rainfall that areas were flooded, but not even from a river or stream. It was just stormwater had nowhere to drain to, so it flooded roadways. And there was loss of life because people were driving, and 2 minutes later they were sitting in water, the car stalled, and they were trapped with no place to go. During Superstorm Sandy, the coastal storm surge that was in Hoboken shut down the PATH terminal. The PATH trains that went under the Hudson River were flooded with seawater, and then the train platforms were flooded, and that closed down that transportation hub for more than 2 weeks, just probably a couple of months.
In particular, saltwater will basically impede low-lying areas with the possibility to cause permanent inundation or flooding. And this basically proves dangerous to civil infrastructure because of saltwater's ability to corrode material with repeated exposure.
When I worked at the Corps of Engineers, they talked about low, medium, and high expectations in 100 years, what sea level rise would be. I'm not sure what's going to become of something like the Barrier Islands on New Jersey, because if you have sea level rise 200 years from now, with sea level rise that's anticipated to happen, that's going to be a real problem for those very expensive homes that are now on the coastal storm surge areas of New Jersey. So now there's...
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Rainfall is no stranger to the streets and subways of New York. City Bike, or New York City's primary bike share system, recorded actually the busiest day in its history when Hurricane Ida stalemated the subway in September of 2021. Impervious surfaces like concrete and asphalt prevent the flow of water through the ground and cover around 72% of the city's land area. Honestly, it's no wonder where the nickname the concrete jungle came from. Surface flow becomes the primary hydrological response during heavy rainfall, and backflow occurs onto the street when drainage systems are overfilled. And then models that use rainfall and sewage system data can be created to evaluate flooding. New York City's 311 platform is a service that allows residents and visitors to file issues with the city government and has been used to collect data on street flooding reports.
There's so many things impacting our infrastructure. Are we spending enough money on upgrades? Are we working on improving infrastructure among some of the vulnerable communities that need it the most? But certainly some events that come along, like Hurricane Sandy, are disruptive in a profound way. But you can have these sort of citywide scale events when something like Sandy happens. It knocks out power for Lower Manhattan for multiple days or sort of up to a week. So.
This is a Brooklyn-bound N train via the R line.
The urban heat island effect is a phenomenon that occurs when the temperatures of urban areas are higher than those of suburban or rural areas. This figure here comes from Yoshika Yamamoto, a researcher in the Science and Technology Foresight Center of NISTEP, which is a Japanese research institute. It basically describes how the urban heat island effect functions. Radiant heat from vehicles and factories can actually be absorbed by some buildings, which therefore raises their temperatures. And this can essentially create a positive feedback loop where more air conditioning is used, which requires more energy. Heat can also be absorbed by the surface, and artificial structures such as pavement can actually reduce albedo or their reflectivity. Then in the states of New York and New Jersey, most of the urban and built-up lands are actually concentrated in the New York City metropolitan area, allowing for the greatest concentration of the urban heat island effect to basically take place within these areas.
Would you say that there's anything unique about New York City in terms of the urban heat island effect or extreme heat?
Relative to some cities in the US and globally, maybe we haven't seen quite as much growth in terms of the areal extent of New York City. So there isn't necessarily like a strong upward trend in the urban heat island over the last few decades. The contrast between some neighborhoods that have so many parks, so much forest cover, Central Park, for example, and then other neighborhoods that, are really sort of devoid of that. As cities around the world are picking adaptation strategies like, do we want to plant more trees? Do we want to provide more evaporation? A lot of factors go into those decisions, from community wants to cost to maintenance, required, how will air temperature
to the 4,
change.
5, 6, L, Q.
MTA's current climate resilience plan proves to be the best course of action for mitigating the effects of climate change on transportation infrastructure. In conjunction, using public transportation can reduce private vehicles on city roads while providing a low emissions option for mobility. Protecting New York City's infrastructure is key to maintaining efficient systems in the face of extreme heat and storm surges.
And the idea is to do things in Manhattan and New York City that help build resilience. If you talk about a rain garden or cisterns, the green solutions are a great idea, but the amount of flooding that we have and the amount of rainfall runoff cannot be dealt with just with green infrastructure. We still need gray infrastructure.
New York State is a nationwide leader in mass transportation as they host the busiest subway and commuter rail systems in the entire country. Advocating for policy changes at the local, state, and federal levels that help transportation will be of importance in combating climate change. For example, congestion pricing in Manhattan Central Business District below 60th Street helps to lower emissions in the area and also raise money for the MTA.
Would you have any advice for your students in terms of what you want them to take away as they move forward in their professional life?
Climate is going to intersect with really any career, anything that you might want to do. So even if you're not an earth scientist like me and like you, if you're into the arts, if you're into law, if you're into finance, there are ways to engage, to have this climate conversation. And everybody needs to be thinking about climate risks, the justice implications, the opportunities that go with resilience and emissions reductions. And I think another that I really, grapple with myself is this balance between sort of optimism and pessimism. Have those climate conversations to get us on that track, whether it's business, whether it's consumers, whether it's people talking to their politicians, to really make sure that we build that world of less emissions and adaptation so that we avoid those really extreme climate changes that I was just saying appear to be coming if we're not careful.
The next and last stop is Coney Island, Stillwell Avenue.